this is Ben Llewellyn. Today I'm talking about the 4 types of languages. What are they? Hey, hit that subscribe button, it really helps the channel. Thank you so much. There are only 4 types of languages. You have gluing languages, agglutinative, analytic languages, which are isolators. You have fusional languages, which are like between the two on a spectrum. And you have polysynthetic languages, shapeshifters. Today, I'm talking about the agglutinative languages. If you are thinking of learning a language, or you're interested in languages and you don't know which language quite to learn, well, knowing how languages work really helps. If you want to learn a difficult language, or if you want to learn a language that's not difficult but one that's far away from your current language, it helps to understand which languages are closer to your language in terms of how they work, even if they're unrelated to each other. There are only 4 types. Which brings us now to agglutinative languages, languages that glue things together.
And hit that like button while you're at it.
I'll go and re-edit the video.
So what are some of these agglutinative languages? Where are they? The Japonic languages. Korean. The Mongolic languages. The Dravidian languages of the Indian subcontinent. The Western Polynesian Malayo languages. The Bantu languages of Africa. The Tungaric and Turkic languages. The Kartvelian languages of the Caucasus. The Finno-Ugric languages. The Algonquin languages of Native America. So what's the general structure of agglutinative languages? Agglutinative languages glue things together. It does not mean in each case that a word is an entire sentence. It can be, in many cases it is. But usually they differentiate between the subject, that's who's doing what, and the object, who's having stuff done to them, or what's having stuff done to them. And these are usually 2 different words, not in every case. The 4th category of languages, polysynthetic, fuse the 2 together more often than not, and have different inflections or changes in a language depending on relationships between different objects and subjects in the same word or sentence. But that's polysynthetic. A gluing language just glues suffixes and prefixes on to a root, usually a verb or an object, depending on how the language works. A good example to show you the difference between how words can form around objects and words can form around subjects is the Quechua language in South America. This is the Incan language. It's spoken by between 10 and 15 million people. It is one of the great language families of the world, the inheritance of the Incan Empire. 25% of people in Peru speak this language. It's spoken through Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador, where I think it's, in those 3, I think it's an official language. It's definitely in Peru. And it's got some speakers in Argentina and Chile, I think. It is an agglutinative language. It has many polysynthetic forms, but that's a different case. The reason why I decided on the Quechua language is because it has a unique form, a reciprocal form, which means that it combines the subject and the object to show that they're relating to each other in a way that's not quite polysynthetic, it's gluing on. So this form is showing that it's being done by both of them, to both of them. Let me show you what I mean. Makachina kurkan. And this literally means they let each other be beaten. So let me break that down for you. Maka, to beat. Chi literally means that it's being or has been done. It's a causative, it's an action that's been done, describing the beating. Naku, this is reciprocal, meaning that it's being done by both or more parties. Which parties are those? Urka, plural. So it's a they or them, we know that. And then the N at the end is third person. So we know that it's they. Word by word, within that glued word, it's literally beat caused by reciprocation of more than one they, these two. So it's really quite different from the fusional and analytical languages that I talked about in the previous videos. Why is this agglutinative and not polysynthetic? Each of these is a grammatical marker rather than an inflection of the other ones. In a polysynthetic language, depending upon the other markers in the sentence or the long word, the other ones will change as well to accommodate. It's a pluralized conjugation, but agglutinative languages are more singular in conjugation, like the fusional languages I showed you in the last video. So there's a single conjugation and it's attached rather than inflected in every one, depending upon the others in the sentence. I hope that makes sense. But to give you a better example, let's look at Turkish and see how one single word can grow into, well, what we would think almost nonsensical, but it's really beautiful if you think about it. Here, let me show you how the Turkish language glues things on to create new meanings. So the word to fear, kork, but fear itself is korku, fearless, korkusuz. To become fearless, korkusuzlash, one who has become fearless. Korkusuzlashmish, to make one fearless. Korkusuzlashtir, to be made fearless. Korkusuzlashtiril, one who has been made fearless. Korkusuzlashtirilzmish, to be able to be made fearless. Korkusuzlashtirillabil, one who will be able to be made fearless. Korkusuzlashtirillabilijek, ones who we can make fearless. Korkusuzlashtirabilijek leramiz, I gather that one is one of those who we can make fearless. Korkusuzlashtirabilijek leramizden mish, as if that one is one of those who we can make fearless. Korkusuzlashtirabilijek leramizden mish jesine. So you see how the meaning can change just by adding all those bits upon. And you could say that that is a sentence, but not really. It's a single word, and the combinations of this can just go on. And I'm sure that Turkish, frankly, is a very fun language. I'll put some information down below if you're interested in that language. But in most cases, agglutinative languages do not work in just creating an entire sentence that is one word. They separate the object and the subject. Turkish is rather the exception in this in many ways, and Turkic languages, because agglutinative languages don't usually just create an entire sentence that is one word. They can, but it doesn't usually work that way. They differentiate in most cases between who or what is doing what, and who or what is having things done to it or what. It separates those two core pillars of action and motion around which objects and other points of grammar orbit around. Basque is one of these that does this with two pillars. Basque is a language isolate. Don't confuse that with isolator languages, like I mentioned in the first of these 4 videos about analytic languages like English and Chinese, which isolate things. Basque is an isolated language in that it has no related language to it. It's completely its own family. But it shares traits with other agglutinative languages, like Turkish, Quechua, Finnish, etc. So how does it work? Take the word for mountain. In Basque, Mendia. And the plural would be Mendiak. But if you are involved in motion to it and from it and such, it's going to change. You're going to have suffixes that attach onto it. Most of these are to do with motion and space. So in the mountains, Mendia town or Mendiakan. To the mountain, Mendira. And you see this is changing according to the spatial awareness of movement. Of the mountains, Mendiatakoa. From the mountain, Mendiarekin. And just to show you that this works a lot differently to the polysynthetic group of languages in which sentences are formed almost always entirely out of just one word that becomes a sentence. You don't have that so much in agglutinative languages. So you're going to see mushing together or gluing multiple times within the same sentence. So look at you are going to the mountain, Mendirazoas. And what you have here are the two pillars of grammar in a sentence. The mountain is what's being gone to. And that changes with movement. But you are, that is pressed together as well in a different way. And so what agglutinative languages do is they isolate those two things mainly, the object and the subject, and relate them to each other with conjugations of space and movement. Basque is a really interesting one for that because it acts so differently to other languages in terms of animate and inanimate objects. I don't have time to go into that, but being an agglutinative language is what makes those ideas in grammar even possible. So what you're seeing here is definitions of motion, cases, directing where objects are in relation to the subject. Let's look at the Hungarian language. It is quite interesting as in an agglutinative language and how it glues things together because it's taken a lot of elements from the fusional languages that are all around it. So it separates words a bit more than, say, Turkish, and it has a lot of cases which alter what things do, and those cases attach on those suffixes and prefixes. Hungarian has quite a bit of prefixes, which add to its gluing nature. For instance, the word for a child in Hungarian is gyermek, and if it's in my childhood, gyerekkoromban, and that OM conveys I or my. Literally, child in the age of, my being in. It's completely different from the other two categories, like I said before. And you get words like out of my childhood, gyerekkorombo, or on my child, gyerekkoromben. You can add things together in ways that alternate meanings in a very efficient way. A lot of these are to do with spatial interaction between subject and object, where things are in location to each other. But a lot of them, like childhood, are conveying meanings to do with time as well, by creating new words out of pressing things together, gluing. If you're interested in Hungarian, I'll put a link down below if I can find anything for you. It's one that I'm interested in. It's really, the history of the Hungarian people is really fascinating. I hope this brief overview of gluing languages or agglutinative languages helps you to understand where it is on the spectrum of these 4 languages. As you've seen though, there's a spectrum of where they are. How agglutinative? Do they have some fusional elements or some polysynthetic elements? And speaking of polysynthetic languages next time. Stay tuned. Hey, diolch yn fawr am wylio. Thank you very much for watching.